I found out my wife had been renting an apartment in another city 2 days before we were supposed to close on our first house. The bank called at 9:16 on a Thursday morning. The woman on the phone was careful with her voice. She said our down payment account no longer had enough funds to complete the purchase. I thought she meant a processing delay. Then she said $76,200 had been transferred out over 7 months. I was sitting at our kitchen table with 2 coffee mugs in front of me. Mine was dark blue, chipped near the handle. Claire's was white with a faded sunflower on the side. Her coffee had gone cold because she had left in a hurry, kissing my cheek while reminding me not to forget my photo ID for the closing appointment. Beside the mugs were paint samples, inspection papers, and a folder labeled in Claire's neat handwriting, Miller Road House. I stared at those words while the woman from the bank explained that the transfers had been authorized from Claire's login. They had gone to a property management company in Cincinnati, then to a credit card I had never seen before. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 37 then. I worked as an operations manager for a medical supply company outside Columbus, Ohio. My job was built from delays, invoices, damaged shipments, and quiet apologies to people who needed things faster than life allowed. Claire taught high school English. She was the kind of teacher parents thanked in grocery stores. She remembered which kids hated reading because nobody had ever handed them the right book. She kept thank you notes in a shoebox under our bed. She cried at old dog commercials and complained that I loaded the dishwasher like I was trying to punish the plates. We had been married 11 years. Our life looked ordinary, which made it feel safe. Sunday pancakes, shared calendars, dental appointments, oil changes, birthday cards mailed 3 days late but still mailed. We were not rich. We were not dramatic. We were 2 tired adults who had built a life out of small repetitions. The coffee mugs were one of them. Every morning, whoever woke up first filled both mugs. Even after arguments, the mugs appeared on the counter. It was never discussed. It was just what we did. A quiet sign that whatever had happened the night before, we were still choosing the same table. At least I thought so. The house on Miller Road was supposed to be our proof that patience mattered. For 9 years, we had rented a narrow 2-bedroom duplex with thin walls and a bathroom door that did not close unless you lifted it with your knee. We saved slowly. I drove the same gray Camry long after the driver's seat started sinking on one side. Claire stopped buying hardcovers and used the library more. We skipped vacations and called them responsible choices, though sometimes I could hear the disappointment underneath her voice. When we first walked through the Miller Road house, Claire stood in the empty living room and looked at the front windows for almost a full minute. Later, in the car, she said she could see Christmas there. I believed her. Maybe that was always my weakness. I believed the sentence because I wanted the life behind it to be true. The warning signs had been small enough to excuse. Claire stayed late at school more often. She changed the passcode on her phone and said the district had updated privacy rules. She started using a new card for small purchases and said it was for classroom supplies. She took calls in the laundry room. She laughed less at home, but smiled more in photos. There was a new kind of silence between us. Not peaceful silence. Not the silence of 2 people reading in the same room. This was sealed silence. Managed silence. The kind that made me feel like I had entered a room after a conversation had stopped. At breakfast, she would sit across from me and scroll through messages while her coffee cooled beside her. When I asked if everything was all right, she usually said school was exhausting. Sometimes she reached for my hand after answering, and I accepted that as proof. I should have asked more. Instead, I became useful. I handled the mortgage paperwork. I scheduled the inspection. I tracked the repair estimates. I sent emails to the lender. I printed documents and placed sticky notes where signatures were needed. Claire thanked me in passing, usually while looking for her keys or answering a message. Once, she touched my shoulder and said she did not know what she would do without me. It should have sounded loving. It sounded rehearsed. Still, the house kept moving forward. Boxes appeared in corners. My sister gave us porch chairs as an early housewarming gift. Claire's mother asked whether the kitchen had enough natural light. My co-workers congratulated me like I had crossed into some quieter, more adult country. Everyone treated the house like proof that our marriage was strong. I treated it that way too. On the morning the bank called, Claire was supposed to meet me at noon to review the final closing documents. She had left early, saying there was an emergency staff meeting. Her sunflower mug was still half full in the sink. The bank representative read the transfers slowly. $8,400 in February. $11,700 in March. $9,200 in April. Then smaller amounts. $1,900. $2,300. $4,600. Each label sounded harmless. Consulting, supplies, temporary hold, school fund. The largest payment had gone to a leasing office in Cincinnati. The representative could not give me much more, but a verification document arrived in my email while we were still speaking. At the bottom of the page was an address. Unit 4, B Tenant Contact, C. Bell. Claire's middle name was Bellamy. For a while, I tried to make another story out of it. Maybe she had helped someone. Maybe a former student was in trouble. Maybe there was a family issue she felt ashamed to explain. I built excuses for her like a man stacking towels under a leaking ceiling, pretending the roof was still fine. Then I saw the lease start date. February 14th. Valentine's Day. That was the date she had told me she was too tired to go out. I had made pasta at home. She had eaten half a plate, apologized for being quiet, and gone upstairs early. I had washed both coffee mugs before bed because I liked waking up to a clean counter. I remember thanking the bank representative before hanging up. That was strange to me later. Someone had just told me that my marriage had a hidden room inside it, and I thanked her for being professional. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand. The refrigerator hummed. A delivery truck passed outside. Somewhere upstairs, a cardboard box shifted because I had packed it badly the night before. I opened the banking app. The numbers were plain, cold, patient. There was no dramatic music in real life when the truth arrived. No thunder, no broken glass. Just a balance that no longer matched the future I had imagined. At 11:42, Claire texted that she would be late. She said the meeting was running long. Then she added a little house emoji. I stared at that tiny roof and chimney until the screen dimmed. That evening, Claire came home with Thai takeout from the place we liked. She apologized for the long day and said everyone at school was losing their mind over testing schedules. She placed the food on the counter, opened a drawer for forks, and smiled at me with the tired familiarity of a woman who expected the room to obey her. I almost let her. I almost sat down. I almost ate noodles out of a cardboard container while the truth waited politely in my inbox. Instead, I asked her about Cincinnati. Not loudly, not angrily, just one word. She stopped moving. Her hand stayed on the drawer handle. Her face did not collapse. It adjusted. That was the moment I understood she was not surprised by the question. She was only surprised by the timing. She said there must have been a mistake. I watched her while she said it. Not because I wanted to catch her lying, but because some weak part of me was still hoping I had misunderstood everything. But Claire was not confused. She was calculating distance between me and the truth, between the kitchen and the door, between the house on Miller Road and the apartment in Cincinnati. The takeout smelled like basil and lime. Her sunflower mug sat in the sink, stained with cold coffee from that morning. And I understood, quietly and completely, that the house had never been our future. It had been her cover story. Claire did not deny the apartment right away. She denied the meaning of it. She said it was temporary. She said it had nothing to do with another man. She said she had been overwhelmed and needed somewhere quiet to work during the school year. She said Cincinnati was close enough that it should not have mattered. I listened without interrupting. That was not patience. It was something colder. I had spent 11 years learning the rhythm of her voice. I knew when she was angry, when she was tired, when she was trying not to laugh in public. That night, I heard something I had never heard before. Preparation. Her explanation had corners already sanded down. It had been waiting for me. I asked why she had used our savings. She said she had planned to put it back. I asked when. She looked at the takeout containers on the counter and said we should eat before the food got cold. That was when I knew there was more. Not because of what she said, because of what she did not say. Claire had always been good at redirecting pain. If a student cried in her classroom, she did not force them to explain. She gave them a pass, sent them to the counselor, and made the room feel normal again. It was one of the reasons people trusted her. She knew how to lower the temperature in a room. But I was not one of her students, and the kitchen was no longer a place where she could rearrange the furniture around the truth. I told her I was not hungry. She stood there for a moment, holding a plastic fork. Then she put it down. For the first time that evening, she looked afraid. Not sorry. Not yet. Afraid. She said the apartment was for someone else at first. A friend from college, she explained. Someone going through a difficult separation. She said she had helped with the lease because the woman's credit was damaged. The story was too crowded. It had too many soft places where questions could disappear. I asked for the woman's name. Claire said it was private. I asked why the tenant contact was listed as C. Bell. She said the leasing office had made an error. I asked why the rent payments had come from our account. She said she had not noticed. That answer changed something in me. Not because it was cruel. Claire was not cruel in the obvious way. She did not throw things or scream or tell me I was worthless. Her damage was quieter. She expected her version of reality to be enough simply because she spoke it calmly. She had not noticed. As if $76,000 could slip out of a marriage unnoticed. As if the years we had spent saving were loose change beneath the couch cushions. As if I was supposed to accept that my wife had built a second address, a second financial life, and a second explanation for everything without realizing what any of it meant. I went upstairs and opened the small fireproof box in our closet. It held our passports, tax returns, insurance paperwork, and the old envelope where we kept documents that mattered too much to lose. I had always thought of it as a boring little archive of adulthood. That night, it felt like evidence from a life I no longer recognized. The apartment lease was not there. Neither was the card statement connected to the transfers. But there was something else. A new credit card had been opened 6 months earlier using our home address. It was in Claire's name, but the automatic payments came from the joint account. I had seen the withdrawals and assumed they were part of the mortgage preparation. Closing costs, inspection fees, deposits. There had been so many numbers during those months that I had let them become background noise. I hated myself for that. I hated how easy it was to see the pattern once I knew where to look. There had been no single moment where she took everything. There had been dozens of moments where I chose not to ask why. I had mistaken trust for silence. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. Claire was sleeping on the couch downstairs. I knew because I could hear the television murmuring through the floorboards. It was still dark outside, the kind of dark that made the windows look like blank walls. I went into the kitchen and saw her phone on the counter. For years, I would have walked past it without thinking. I had never checked her messages. I had never wanted to become that person. I believed privacy was part of love. I believed marriage did not mean ownership, but privacy and secrecy are not the same thing. Her phone lit up before I touched it. A notification appeared across the screen. "Are you coming Friday? Or should I stop waiting?" There was no name, only a number. The message disappeared after a few seconds, but I had already read it. I stood there holding my own breath. I did not unlock the phone. I did not need to. The message was not proof of everything, but it was proof that I had not invented the shape of the problem. Someone was waiting for her in Cincinnati. Someone who knew Friday mattered. The house closing was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I put the phone back exactly where it had been. Then I made coffee. I filled my blue mug and out of habit reached for Claire's sunflower mug too. My hand stopped halfway. That was the first time in 11 years I made coffee only for myself. It was a small thing, almost embarrassing, but I remember it more clearly than the bank call. The empty space beside my mug looked larger than it should have. The counter had not changed. The kitchen had not changed. Yet the room no longer belonged to the same marriage. Claire came in around 7. Her hair was pulled back badly, and she looked older than she had the night before. Not older in years. Older in the way people look after a long flight, when their body has arrived somewhere before their mind has caught up. She asked whether I had slept. I said no. She nodded as if that was reasonable. Then she asked whether I had called the lender. I looked at her for a long moment. That was the first question she asked. Not whether I was all right. Not whether I wanted to talk. Not whether she could explain. She wanted to know what I had done about the closing. I told her the lender had postponed it. For the first time, she looked genuinely upset. The expression lasted only a second. Then she said it was probably for the best. She said we had rushed into the house. She said maybe the pressure of buying it had caused all of this. I remember thinking that she was trying to make the house guilty. It was easier than admitting she had used it. She left for school without drinking coffee. At the door, she paused and said she would call later. I watched her walk to her car through the front window. She did not turn around. At 8:03, another notification appeared on the shared tablet we kept near the television. It was connected to the same cloud account we used for calendars, photos, grocery lists, and bills. Claire had forgotten that it mirrored certain alerts. A payment confirmation appeared. Cincinnati Property Management. Rent received. The amount was $2,450. The date was that morning. Below it was a note from the leasing office confirming that Unit 4B would remain reserved through the end of the year. I read the message twice. Then I noticed a second line. Parking access updated for authorized resident and guest. Guest. The word sat there quietly, almost politely. I did not know who the guest was. I did not know whether it was one person or several. I did not know how long Claire had been going there, or what she had told herself while she drove away from our house. But I knew the apartment was not temporary. It was maintained. It was paid for. It was prepared for. And somewhere between the cold coffee, the delayed closing, and that simple word on the screen, I stopped waiting for Claire to tell me the truth on her own. I began looking for it. I did not hire a private investigator. I did not follow Claire's car. I did not sit outside the apartment in Cincinnati and wait for a stranger to come through the door. Those things belonged to a version of betrayal I had seen in movies, where pain immediately becomes action. In real life, I still had to go to work. I still had emails to answer. I still had a mortgage lender calling about deadlines that no longer meant anything. I still had to stand in meetings and explain shipping delays while my own life was becoming a file I did not want to open. For 3 days, I said almost nothing to Claire. She stayed in the duplex, but she moved through it like a guest. She slept on the couch. She left before I woke up and came home after I had already eaten. When we were in the same room, she spoke in careful fragments. She said she needed time. She said I was making assumptions. She said she had made mistakes, but that did not mean our marriage was over. I noticed she never said she had told me the truth. That distinction became important. On Monday morning, I called a lawyer named Rebecca Nolan. Her office was above a bakery in downtown Columbus. I had passed the building hundreds of times without seeing it. The staircase smelled faintly of sugar and old carpet. Rebecca's receptionist gave me a clipboard, a bottle of water, and a look that told me she had watched many people arrive there carrying the same stunned expression. Rebecca was in her early 50s, with silver hair cut close to her jaw and a voice that did not waste words. She did not ask whether I wanted to save the marriage. She asked what accounts existed, what property was jointly owned, whether there were children, and whether I had copies of the transactions. I told her about the apartment. I told her about the lease. I told her about the money. Then I told her about the message on Claire's phone. Rebecca listened without reacting. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk and said that suspicion was not the same as evidence, but financial records had a way of becoming honest when people stopped talking. She advised me not to confront Claire again until I understood what had happened. She said I should preserve every document I already had access to legally: bank statements, tax returns, shared account records, mortgage emails, cloud storage files, anything connected to our joint finances. She also told me something I had not expected. She said I should prepare for the possibility that Claire would become more convincing as the facts became clearer. At first, I did not understand. Rebecca explained that people who had lived inside a lie for a long time often became skilled at presenting themselves as wounded when the lie was discovered. They did not always see themselves as dishonest. Sometimes they saw themselves as trapped, misunderstood, or forced into impossible choices. That did not excuse anything, but it explained why I had felt guilty for asking questions. I left her office with a list of documents to gather and a feeling I could not name. It was not relief. Relief would have meant something was solved. It was structure. For the first time since the bank call, I had a way to move forward that did not depend on Claire's mood. That evening, I opened the shared cloud account. Claire and I had used it for years. Photos from holidays, scanned receipts, copies of our taxes, a folder of house listings, another folder called Future, where Claire had saved pictures of kitchens with wide windows and porches with hanging plants. I had avoided looking through it because I was afraid of what I might find. Then I realized fear had already found me. The cloud storage was organized the way Claire organized everything. Clean labels, color-coded folders, names that made sense at first glance. School, home, taxes, house, family, miscellaneous. There was one folder I had never noticed. It was called Drafts. At first it looked empty. Then I saw a small gray line beneath the title, Hidden Items. There were 43 files. Most were PDFs. The first was a lease agreement for Unit 4B in Cincinnati. Claire Bellamy Mercer was listed as the primary tenant. The lease began on February 14th and ran for 12 months. The monthly rent was $2,450. Utilities were included. Parking was extra. The second file was a furniture invoice. A bed, a small dining table, 2 chairs, a couch, a lamp, kitchenware. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. That made it worse. It was not a hotel room. It was not an impulsive escape. It was a place arranged for ordinary life. There was a receipt for a grocery delivery service, a receipt for towels, a receipt for a set of gray curtains, a receipt for a coffee maker. I stared at the coffee maker receipt for a long time. It was the same brand we had at home. I imagined Claire standing in a store, choosing something familiar for a kitchen I did not know existed. Maybe she had wanted the apartment to feel like home. Maybe she had wanted it to feel nothing like home. I still do not know. There were also emails, not many. Claire had been careful, but careful people often keep one thing too long because they think they will need it later. One email was from a man named Owen Price. He worked for a private tutoring company in Cincinnati. I learned that from his email signature, which was neat and professional. He wrote that he had spoken with the property manager and that the parking arrangement had been updated. He said he hoped Claire would not change her mind about moving closer by the summer. Moving closer. The phrase did not say everything, but it said enough. I read it 3 times. Then I found a chain of messages between Claire and Owen from late March. The messages were not romantic in the obvious sense. There were no declarations, no dramatic promises. That almost made them harder to read. They discussed furniture delivery times. They complained about traffic. They talked about a restaurant near the apartment. Owen wrote that he had bought extra coffee because Claire always drank more when she was stressed. Claire replied that she would be there Friday. Friday. The same day we were supposed to close on Miller Road. I sat in the dark living room with the tablet in my lap and the blue light from the screen reflecting off the empty television. I did not cry. I thought I might. But the feeling was too deep for that. It was like discovering that a floor you had stood on for years had been hollow underneath. The next morning, I called the lender and asked for every document connected to our mortgage application. I told them there had been undisclosed financial activity and that I needed copies for legal review. The lender did not ask many questions. They sent the files by noon. That was when I found the first direct lie. Claire had submitted a statement saying that our savings account had no pending obligations outside the home purchase. She had signed it electronically 2 weeks earlier. By then, the apartment rent had already been paid for 6 months. The second lie was more personal. In the mortgage application, Claire had listed her monthly expenses. There was no mention of the credit card, no mention of the lease, no mention of the money she had moved. She had not simply hidden the apartment from me. She had hidden it from the bank, from the lender, from the future we were supposedly building. That afternoon, I received a call from my friend Marcus. He had worked with me for almost 8 years. We were not the kind of friends who talked about feelings easily, but he knew something was wrong because I had missed 2 meetings and answered every question like I was reading from a manual. He asked if I wanted to get lunch. I said no at first. Then I changed my mind. We sat in a quiet diner near the office. Marcus ordered a burger. I ordered coffee and did not drink it. I told him only part of the story. The money, the apartment, the possibility of another man. He did not offer advice immediately. He just listened. Then he said he had seen Claire once, about 2 months earlier, near a hotel by the interstate. He had been there for a vendor conference. He said he almost came over to say hello, but she was with someone and looked like she did not want to be recognized. He had not told me because he assumed it was a colleague. I believed him. Marcus was not trying to add pain to the situation. He looked embarrassed for even mentioning it. But his memory gave the story another edge. Claire had not only been living a second life in Cincinnati. She had been moving through places where she could have been seen, trusting that nobody would connect the pieces. I drove home after lunch and parked in the driveway for nearly an hour. The duplex looked the same. The cracked flower pot by the steps. The porch light that flickered when it rained. The small window where Claire used to place paper snowflakes in December because she said the neighborhood needed more effort. I thought about going inside and asking her everything. Who was Owen? How long had this been happening? Why had she kept the house search alive? Why had she let me transfer money, sign forms, and tell my family we were finally buying a place of our own? But I already knew the answer to the question that mattered most. She had let me believe because believing made me useful. That night, I printed the lease, the receipts, the emails, the mortgage documents, and the bank statements. I placed them in a plain folder and wrote the date on the front. I did not call it evidence. Not yet. I called it what happened. And for the first time, I understood that the truth was no longer something Claire could explain away. It had dates. It had signatures. It had an address. And it had a name. I kept the folder in the trunk of my car for 2 days. That may sound cautious, but it was not. It was avoidance. I did not want it in the house because the house still contained too many versions of Claire. Her winter coat on the hook by the door. Her books stacked beside the bed. Her handwriting on the grocery list. The sunflower mug in the cabinet turned upside down beside mine. The folder did not belong among those things. It belonged somewhere separate. Somewhere dry, quiet, and impossible to ignore. Rebecca Nolan had told me not to hide evidence from Claire if it was jointly accessible. But she also told me I had no obligation to make it easy for someone to destroy or alter records. She said I should preserve what I had and stop discussing the details without legal guidance. I followed her advice because I had reached the end of trusting my instincts. For 11 years, my instincts had told me Claire was tired when she was distant, stressed when she was secretive, overwhelmed when she was cold. I had translated every warning into a reason to be more understanding. I had thought love meant interpreting someone generously. Now I understood that generosity without boundaries could become a kind of permission. On Wednesday evening, Claire came home earlier than usual. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the mortgage withdrawal notice in front of me. Not the folder, just the notice. 1 page, 1 number. One official statement that our closing had been suspended because the funds were gone. She stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the paper. Then she looked at me. She asked if I had spoken to a lawyer. I did not answer right away. Outside, rain tapped against the kitchen window. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. The room smelled faintly of dish soap because I had cleaned the counter before she came home. I did not know why I had done that. Maybe I wanted one thing in the house to look normal. I told her I had. Claire sat across from me. She did not take off her coat. That detail mattered. It told me she had not come home to stay. She had come home to negotiate. She said she had made mistakes. She said the apartment had begun as a place to think. She said she had felt invisible in our marriage long before I noticed anything was wrong. She said she had been afraid that buying the house would make everything permanent. I listened. Some of it was probably true. That was the part that hurt in a different way. Claire had not invented every feeling. I had worked too much. I had treated exhaustion like a temporary season instead of a way of life. I had assumed that because we were not fighting, we were fine. I had allowed routine to stand in for intimacy. Maybe I should have asked more questions before the silence became normal. Maybe I should have noticed when she stopped telling me about her day. But none of that explained the money. None of it explained the lease, the false mortgage documents, or the man who had bought coffee for her in another apartment. I told her I had found the files. Her face changed slowly, not dramatically. Claire did not collapse into tears or start shouting. She became still. Her eyes moved toward the hallway, then back to me. For a second, I saw something almost like relief. The burden of maintaining a lie had finally been taken from her. She asked what files. I told her I had found the lease, the receipts, and the messages. Then I said Owen's name. That was when she stopped pretending. She did not confirm everything. She did not need to. She said Owen had been kind to her during a difficult year. She said he understood parts of her that I had stopped seeing. She said the apartment was not supposed to become what it became. I asked what it was supposed to become. She looked down at the table. She said she did not know. That was the closest thing to honesty she gave me. I asked why she had continued with the house. She said she had been trying to decide. I asked between what? She did not answer. The rain continued against the window. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and then went quiet. I remember thinking how ordinary the night sounded. The world had not changed because my marriage had split open. Cars still passed. People still cooked dinner. Someone nearby was probably watching television and complaining about nothing important. Claire said she could fix the money. She said Owen had offered to help. She said she could take out a loan. She said we could still close on the house if I gave her time. That was the moment I understood the full shape of what she had done. She did not want to repair the marriage. She wanted to preserve the appearance of it. The house was still useful to her. It gave her stability, respectability, a place to return to if the apartment failed. It gave her the life she had shown her family, her co-workers, and everyone who thought we were a dependable couple saving for something better. I told her I was not closing on the house. She stared at me. Then she said I was punishing her. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell her she deserved worse. I said I was refusing to sign documents that would bind me to a future built on lies. She said I was being cold. That word stayed with me. For years, I had been the one who softened everything. I was the one who apologized first, even when I was not sure what I had done. I was the one who kept conversations from becoming uncomfortable. I was the one who made room for her moods, her stress, her changing explanations. Now that I had stopped doing it, she called me cold. I told her I had spoken with a lawyer and that we would need to separate our finances immediately. She stood up so quickly that her chair scraped against the floor. For the first time, anger showed through. She said I had no right to treat her like a criminal. I said I was treating the situation like it had consequences. That was all. No speech, no threat, no dramatic ending. Just the truth, placed between us. Claire walked upstairs and shut the bedroom door. I heard drawers opening and closing. I heard the closet door slide. For a few minutes, I thought she was packing. Then she came back down holding the fireproof box from our closet. She placed it on the table. She said I had always cared more about documents than people. I looked at the box. Passports, tax records, insurance papers, the small archive of our shared life. I wanted to tell her that I had cared about people so much I had ignored documents. That was the problem. Instead, I opened the box. Inside, several papers were missing. The most recent tax return was gone. So were copies of our savings statements and the paperwork from the mortgage pre-approval. Claire had taken them before I had even confronted her. She had known this moment might come. She had prepared for it. The realization was quiet, but final. There are moments when a relationship ends before anyone leaves the room. Not because the love disappears all at once, but because the last explanation becomes impossible to believe. I looked at Claire across the table and understood that I did not know her well enough to rebuild a life with her. Maybe I had known pieces of her. The teacher, the woman who loved old bookstores, the person who made pancakes on Sundays and left notes in my lunch bag when I had difficult weeks at work. But there was another version of Claire, who could rent an apartment, move money, sign false documents, and wait until she was caught before deciding what honesty should look like. I could not compete with that version. I could not negotiate with it. I called Rebecca from the kitchen while Claire stood near the stairs. I told her that documents were missing and that Claire had acknowledged the apartment and the financial transfers. Rebecca asked whether I felt safe in the house. I said yes. She told me to keep the conversation brief, avoid further arguments, and meet her first thing in the morning. When I ended the call, Claire was crying, not loudly, not theatrically. She sat on the bottom step with her face turned away from me, one hand pressed against her mouth. For a moment, I felt the old instinct rise in me, the instinct to sit beside her, to tell her we would figure it out, to make her pain less sharp, even if she had caused mine. I almost moved. Then I saw the sunflower mug on the counter. It was clean. She must have washed it sometime that afternoon. It stood beside my blue mug, exactly where it had always been. 2 cups, one routine, a picture of a marriage that no longer existed. I stayed where I was. The next morning, I opened a separate bank account in my name. I redirected my paycheck. I canceled the automatic transfers connected to our joint savings. I notified the lender that I would not proceed with the mortgage application. Rebecca began the process of requesting financial records through formal channels. Claire left for Cincinnati that Friday. She did not tell me where she was going. She packed one suitcase and said she needed space. I did not ask her to stay. After she left, I walked through the duplex and turned off the lights one room at a time. The house felt unfamiliar, but it was honest. There were no hidden addresses inside it. No second lease. No future waiting in another city. Just the quiet aftermath of a decision I had not wanted to make. That evening, I took Claire's sunflower mug from the cabinet and placed it in a box with the rest of her things. I did not break it. I did not throw it away. Claire did not come back the next day. She did not come back the day after that either. At first, she sent short messages. She said she was staying with a friend. She said she needed time to process everything. She said she hoped I would not make decisions while I was angry. I was not angry in the way she meant. Anger would have been easier. Anger had movement in it. It gave people something to do with their hands, somewhere to put the pressure. What I felt was heavier and less useful. I woke up each morning with the sense that I had forgotten something important, then remembered it before I opened my eyes. The house was gone. The savings were gone. My wife was in another city with a man whose name I had learned from a hidden folder. And I was still expected to answer emails at work, buy groceries, pay rent, and explain to my sister why we were no longer closing on Miller Road. I told almost no one the full truth. That was another mistake. Silence had protected Claire for years, and now I was still using it out of habit. When my mother called to ask whether the closing had been rescheduled, I told her there had been a financial complication. She became quiet for a moment, then said that Claire had sounded stressed lately. I could hear the question underneath her voice. She wanted to know whether we were all right. I said we were dealing with it. That was the phrase I used for everything. We are dealing with it. As if there was still a we, as if the problem belonged equally to both of us. 3 days after Claire left, I received an email from her mother. It was long, longer than anything she had ever written to me. She said Claire was emotionally exhausted. She said marriage could become lonely when one person worked too much. She said I had always been a good provider, but perhaps I had not been a good listener. She said Claire had made poor choices, but that I should not humiliate her by involving lawyers. The email ended with a sentence that stayed with me. She wrote that people did strange things when they felt unseen. I read it several times. Then I deleted it. Not because it was entirely wrong. I had been absent in ways I did not want to admit. I had come home tired and assumed that sitting beside Claire counted as being present. I had asked how her day was, but sometimes I asked while checking work messages. I had listened for the summary, not the meaning. There were things I should have done differently, but there was a difference between neglect and deception. One was a failure that could be named and repaired. The other was a life built behind someone's back. Claire's mother did not mention the apartment. She did not mention the money. She did not mention Owen. She did not mention the mortgage documents Claire had signed while hiding debts and rent payments. She had chosen the version of the story where Claire was fragile and I was cold. That version was easier for everyone. It allowed them to feel compassionate without having to face what Claire had done. A week later, Claire called me from Cincinnati. Her voice was soft, careful. She said she had been thinking about our marriage. She said she knew she had hurt me. She said Owen was not the reason everything had fallen apart. I did not ask whether that was true. By then, I had stopped looking for the exact sentence that would make the story less painful. She said she wanted to come home and talk. I told her she could come back to collect more of her belongings, but I would not discuss finances without our lawyers present. There was a long silence. Then she said I had changed. I told her I had. That was all. The next day, Rebecca called with an update. Claire had opened 2 additional credit cards in the previous year. One was connected to the apartment expenses. The other had been used for travel, restaurants, and purchases in Cincinnati. The balances were not enormous, but they were large enough to matter. There were also cash withdrawals that could not be explained by household expenses. Rebecca said the important thing was that the records showed a pattern. Not one bad decision. Not one desperate month. A pattern. I wrote the word down after the call ended. Pattern. It was the word that explained why I could not accept Claire's apologies as a solution. Apologies were for isolated moments. A pattern was something built over time, something maintained through repetition. The next escalation came from a place I did not expect. Social media. Claire posted a photograph of herself sitting by a window in what I recognized as the Cincinnati apartment. She was holding a cup of coffee. The caption said she was choosing peace after a difficult season. Within an hour, people began commenting. Friends from college told her they were proud of her. Former co-workers wrote that she deserved happiness. Her cousin said she had always been too hard on herself. Nobody knew what the photograph cost. Nobody knew the coffee mug in her hand had been bought with money from our savings account. I stared at the post for a long time. Then I closed the app. There was no point in responding. Public arguments were not truth. They were performances, and Claire had always been good at giving people the version of herself they wanted to see. Still, the post did damage. A few people began reaching out to me, not directly accusing me of anything, but asking careful questions. One of Claire's friends wrote that she hoped I was giving her space. Another said she had heard Claire was going through a lot. The story had begun to travel without me. I could feel it moving through family group chats, school hallways, old friendships, and quiet phone calls. In every version, I was the husband who had responded too harshly to a wife in crisis. Claire did not have to say I had mistreated her. She only had to leave enough empty space for other people to imagine it. That was the kind of manipulation I had never understood before. It did not require direct lies. It required selective silence. 2 weeks after she left, I came home from work and found the front door unlocked. For a second, I thought someone had broken in. Then I saw the hallway closet open. Claire had taken more of her things: clothes, shoes, her framed photographs, the box of old letters from her grandmother, the small lamp she had kept beside the bed. She had also taken the sunflower mug from the box where I had placed it. But she had not taken everything. On the kitchen counter, she had left a note. It was only 3 lines. She wrote that she had not wanted things to end this way. She wrote that she hoped I would remember the good parts of us. She wrote that she would contact me when she was ready to talk. There was no mention of the missing documents, no mention of the money, no mention of Owen. I folded the note and placed it inside the folder marked what happened. That evening, I called Rebecca again. She told me to change the locks. I did. The locksmith arrived the next morning. He was an older man with a quiet voice and a toolbox that looked heavier than it should have been. He did not ask questions. He replaced the deadbolt, tested the new key, and handed it to me. The key felt small in my palm. It was not a victory. It was not revenge. It was simply a boundary made of metal. After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The duplex still looked the same. The porch light still flickered when it rained. The cracked flower pot was still by the steps. But the lock had changed, and because of that, the house felt different. Not safer exactly. More honest. A few days later, Claire's lawyer sent a letter. It claimed that I had unfairly restricted Claire's access to marital property. It requested information about the bank accounts and asked that I not dispose of any shared belongings. Rebecca responded quickly. She included the transaction records, the apartment lease, and confirmation that Claire had removed property from the home without notice. The letter from Claire's lawyer became quieter after that. Not apologetic, just quieter. Then Owen contacted me. His message came through email. He said he did not know the full financial situation. He said Claire had told him we were separated long before she signed the lease. He said he had believed the money was hers. I read the email without feeling much. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he was not. It no longer mattered to me in the same way. Owen was not the person who had promised to build a home with me. He had not sat at our kitchen table and talked about paint colors. He had not placed his name beside mine on a mortgage application while hiding another life. Claire had done that. Done. I forwarded the email to Rebecca and did not reply. By the end of the month, the divorce process had officially begun. The word looked strange on paper. Divorce. It seemed too clean for what it contained. It did not mention the cold coffee. It did not mention the empty chair at the kitchen table. It did not mention the way I still woke up expecting to hear Claire moving around downstairs. Legal language reduced a marriage to dates, assets, accounts, and requests. Maybe that was necessary. Maybe it was the only way to move through something too large to hold all at once. One night, I opened the cabinet where the coffee mugs had always been. Only my blue mug was there. For a moment, I reached for the second mug out of habit. Then I remembered. I made 1 cup of coffee. I sat alone at the kitchen table and drank it while the room stayed quiet around me. Outside, rain touched the window. Inside, nothing was hidden anymore. I just understood that it no longer belonged beside mine. The divorce did not end with a courtroom speech. There was no moment when Claire stood up and admitted everything in front of strangers. No judge looked at her with disappointment. No one in the room applauded when the truth became official. Most of it happened through emails, bank statements, legal notices, and meetings where people spoke quietly about money that had once represented years of our lives. That was how our marriage ended. Not with a dramatic explosion, with spreadsheets. By late October, the trees outside the duplex had begun to lose their leaves. The porch was covered with wet brown shapes that stuck to the steps after it rained. I had stopped checking Claire's social media. I had stopped asking mutual friends what they had heard. I had stopped expecting an explanation that would make any of it feel reasonable. Rebecca had gathered enough records to show that Claire had transferred money from our joint savings without my knowledge and used it to maintain the Cincinnati apartment, pay personal credit cards, and cover expenses connected to Owen. The records did not tell me whether she loved him. They did not tell me whether she had ever planned to leave me honestly. They did not tell me what she felt when she came home each night and saw the house paperwork on the kitchen counter. But they showed what she did. And in the end, that mattered more. Claire's lawyer tried to argue that the money had been used during the marriage and should be treated as a shared expense. Rebecca responded with the lease agreement, the concealed credit cards, the false mortgage disclosures, and the timeline of transfers. The argument changed after that. Not because Claire suddenly became honest, because the documents left less room for interpretation. The apartment was not a shared expense. It was a hidden life. The first settlement meeting took place in a conference room with gray walls and a long table that looked like it had been chosen specifically to make people feel small. Claire arrived 10 minutes late. She wore a dark coat and carried a leather folder against her chest. I had not seen her in person for almost 2 months. She looked thinner, tired, different. For a moment, I felt the old reflex again. The urge to ask whether she was eating, whether she was sleeping, whether she was all right. Then I remembered the apartment. I remembered the rent payments. I remembered the message that asked whether she was coming Friday. I sat down across from her and opened my folder. Claire did not look at me for most of the meeting. Her lawyer spoke first. He said Claire wanted a fair resolution. He said she did not want the process to become hostile. He said she hoped we could divide our remaining assets without unnecessary conflict. Rebecca answered in the same calm tone. She said I was prepared to be fair. That word mattered. Fair did not mean forgiving everything. Fair did not mean pretending the money had disappeared by accident. Fair meant the consequences would follow the facts. The savings account was nearly empty by then. Claire had spent much of what she had transferred. Some had gone to rent, some to furniture, some to travel, some to credit cards. Some had been withdrawn in cash. But not all of it was gone. Rebecca found a separate account in Claire's name with $18,600 remaining. It had been opened shortly after the apartment lease began. The account had received several transfers from the joint savings account, then small deposits from Owen. Claire claimed the money was a loan. Maybe it was, but it was still money connected to a life she had hidden. The settlement proposal required Claire to return the remaining funds, assume responsibility for the credit card debt in her name, and give up any claim to the security deposit from the Miller Roadhouse transaction. The deposit had not been large compared to the savings, but it mattered to me. It was one of the last pieces of money that still belonged to the future I had imagined. Claire's lawyer objected. He said she would struggle financially. Rebecca said I had already struggled financially because of Claire's decisions. There was silence after that. Not the old silence from our kitchen. This was different. This was the silence of people who understood that the story had reached the point where words could not change the record. Claire finally spoke. She said she had never meant to hurt me this much. Her voice was quiet, almost flat. I believed that she believed it. People often think intention is the same as responsibility. They think if they did not wake up wanting to destroy someone, then the damage they caused should be easier to forgive. But Claire had made hundreds of choices. She had opened accounts. She had signed leases. She had moved money. She had answered messages. She had returned to our duplex and sat across from me at breakfast while another life waited for her in Cincinnati. Pain did not become accidental just because it was not planned in one single moment. I told her I understood that she had not wanted this outcome. Then I told her I could not keep paying for choices she had made in secret. She nodded. That was all. The meeting ended without an agreement. For a week, I expected the process to become uglier. I expected accusations, more letters, more attempts to make me feel guilty for refusing to rescue Claire from the consequences of her own decisions. Instead, something shifted. Owen moved out of the Cincinnati apartment. I learned this through a document Rebecca received from Claire's attorney. The lease was being terminated early. There were fees. There were unpaid utility charges. The furniture had been sold or removed. The quiet little home Claire had built in Unit 4B was coming apart. I did not feel satisfaction when I read that. I felt tired. For months, I had imagined the apartment as a place full of warmth and secrets, a place where Claire had become someone else. But in the end, it was just another rented room with bills attached to it. A few days later, Claire agreed to the settlement. She signed the papers without asking to see me. The agreement was not perfect. No agreement could return the years or repair the trust. I did not get every dollar back. Some of the money was gone, and no legal process could make it reappear. But I got enough to start again. Claire returned the remaining funds from the separate account. She took responsibility for her credit card debt. She gave up her share of the security deposit and agreed not to pursue any claim against my new savings account or future earnings. The divorce was finalized in December. The judge's order arrived in a plain envelope. I opened it at the kitchen table, the same table where I had first learned about the missing money, the same table where Claire had stood with Thai takeout and tried to tell me there had been a mistake, the same table where I had made coffee for the first time in 11 years. The document was only a few pages long. It said our marriage had ended. It listed dates, signatures, and obligations. It did not mention love. It did not mention the sunflower mug. It did not mention how strange it was to see Claire's name printed beside mine one last time. After I read it, I placed the papers back in their envelope and sat there for a while. I thought I would feel free. Instead, I felt quiet. Freedom, I learned, did not arrive like a door swinging open. It arrived like a room after someone stopped lying in it. A week later, I went to the bank and opened a new savings account. The teller asked what I was saving for. For a second, I almost said a house. Then I stopped. I did not know what I was saving for yet. Maybe that was the first honest answer I had given anyone in months. I told her I was just starting over. She smiled politely and handed me the paperwork. That afternoon, I drove past Miller Road. The house had been sold to another couple. There were holiday lights around the porch, and a child's bicycle leaned against the front steps. I did not slow down for long. The house had never been mine. Not really. But the money I had recovered was mine. The time ahead of me was mine. And for the first time since the bank call, I understood that I did not need to win back the future Claire had taken. I only needed to stop building my life around what she had left behind. Block 7. Resonance. By the following spring, I had moved out of the duplex. The lease had ended in March, and I did not renew it. There was no dramatic reason for leaving. The rent had gone up, the bathroom door still did not close properly, and every room held a version of me I no longer wanted to visit. I found a small one-bedroom apartment on the north side of Columbus. It was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building above a florist shop. The windows faced a row of maples and a parking lot that looked gray most of the time. The kitchen was narrow. The bedroom barely fit a bed, a dresser, and one chair. It was not the house on Miller Road. It did not have a porch. It did not have room for a garden. It did not have wide windows or a fireplace or a place where someone could imagine Christmas. But it was mine. That mattered more than I expected. The first night after moving in, I sat on the floor because I had not assembled the table yet. I ate soup from a paper bowl and listened to traffic below. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and cardboard. There were boxes against the wall, a lamp without a shade, and one blue coffee mug on the counter. For the first time in months, I did not feel like I was waiting for something. I had spent so much time waiting for Claire to come home, waiting for her explanation, waiting for the bank to call back, waiting for lawyers to send documents, waiting for someone to tell me which version of the story was true. But the new apartment did not ask me to wait. It asked me to live inside it. At work, things slowly became easier. Marcus never pushed me to talk about the divorce. He just started inviting me to lunch again. Sometimes we ate in the break room. Sometimes we went to the diner near the office. He would complain about shipping schedules, bad coffee, and the new supervisor who kept using the phrase "circle back" in every meeting. Those ordinary conversations helped more than advice would have. I had spent months living inside a problem. Marcus reminded me that the world still contained boring things: delayed deliveries, overcooked fries, rainy commutes, people who forgot to attach files to emails. Normal life had not disappeared. I had only stopped seeing it. In April, my sister asked if I wanted to come to her house for Sunday breakfast. She had asked before, but I had always found a reason not to go. I did not want to answer questions. I did not want to see the pity in anyone's face. But that morning, I went. My niece, Hannah, was 8 years old then. She opened the door before my sister could reach it. She was missing one front tooth and had flour on her cheek from helping make pancakes. She hugged me without saying anything. Then she asked if I had brought my blue mug. I laughed for the first time in a long time. She had seen it once at the duplex. She remembered it because she said it looked sad, but brave. I told her I had left it at home. She looked disappointed for a second, then ran into the kitchen and came back holding a mug with a crooked picture of a cat on it. She said I could use hers. I took it. The coffee tasted the same as coffee always did. A little too strong, a little too hot. But I sat at my sister's table and watched Hannah talk with syrup on her chin, and something inside me loosened. Not healed. Healing was too simple a word. But loosened. That was enough. Claire sent one message that spring. It came on a Sunday afternoon while I was cleaning out a box of old paperwork. Her name appeared on my phone, and for a few seconds, I did not open it. Then I did. She wrote that she hoped I was doing well. She said she had been thinking about the good parts of our marriage. She said she was sorry for the pain she caused. She said she understood if I never wanted to respond. The message was not cruel. It was not manipulative, at least not in the obvious way. Maybe she had finally reached the point where she could see what she had done. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe Owen was gone. Maybe the apartment was gone. Maybe the version of herself she had tried to become had not survived the cost of becoming it. I did not know. I still do not. For a long time, I held the phone and thought about everything I could say. I could tell her about the house I never bought. I could tell her about the nights I sat alone at the kitchen table. I could tell her that I had learned the difference between being needed and being loved. I could tell her that she had not only taken money, she had taken years of certainty and replaced them with questions I would probably carry for the rest of my life. But none of those words would change anything. So I wrote one sentence. I said I hoped she found a life she could live honestly. Then I deleted the draft. I did not send anything. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I no longer needed her to understand me. That was the real ending. Not the divorce papers, not the settlement, not the changed locks. The ending was the moment I realized I did not need Claire's apology to make my life feel complete. In May, I bought a small table for the apartment. It was not expensive. It was made of light wood and had a few scratches on the surface when it arrived. I almost returned it, then decided I did not care. I put it by the window. Every morning, I made coffee in my blue mug and sat there for 10 minutes before work. Some mornings I read the news. Some mornings I looked at the trees. Some mornings I did nothing at all. The silence in that apartment was different from the silence in the duplex. It did not feel sealed. It did not feel like someone was hiding behind it. It was simply quiet. One evening, after a long day at work, I opened the cabinet and found the blue mug waiting where I had left it. I held it for a moment, noticing the chip near the handle. I had thought about replacing it many times. It was old. It was imperfect. It had survived more than it should have. But I kept it. Not because it reminded me of Claire, because it reminded me of myself. I had spent years believing that stability meant keeping everything exactly as it was. I thought a good life was built by holding on tightly enough. But some things cannot be held together without losing yourself in the process. The truth did not destroy my world. It cleared the path to a better one.